300 bishops, a controversial priest, and a Roman emperor who wasn't even baptized. They gathered in a lakeside city in what's now Turkey, and what they decided in that room is still being spoken out loud in churches around the world every single Sunday, 1700 years later. The year was 325 AD, and Christianity stood at a crossroads. Just 12 years earlier, followers of Jesus could be thrown into prison, tortured, or executed for practicing their faith. Now, suddenly, they had the ear of the most powerful man on earth, and he had a problem he needed them to solve. To understand why the Council of Nicaea happened, you need to understand the crisis that made it necessary. And that crisis had a name: Arius. Arius was a Christian priest from Libya, born around 250 AD, and he was nothing if not charismatic. He was a poet, a singer, a man who set his theological teachings to catchy songs and poems. Sailors loved him, dockworkers loved him, young people loved him. He was the kind of preacher who could fill a room and hold it. But Arius wasn't working in isolation. He'd been deeply influenced by the teachings of Lucian of Antioch, a scholar whose theological school produced some of the most controversial thinkers of the early church. But Arius had an idea that threatened to tear the entire Christian world apart. His argument went like this: if God the Father begat God the Son, then the Son must have had a beginning. And if the Son had a beginning, then there was a time when the Son did not exist. In other words, Jesus Christ was not eternal. He was not equal to God. He was a created being, the highest and first of all creation, yes, but a creature nonetheless. This might sound like a minor philosophical distinction. It was anything but. If Arius was right, then the fundamental nature of Christian worship came into question. Were Christians praying to God, or were they praying to something God had made? By 320 or 321, Alexander, the Bishop of Alexandria, had seen enough. He convened a council of over 100 bishops from Egypt and Libya, and they formally condemned Arius's teachings. But Arius didn't back down. He had powerful allies, including Eusebius of Nicaea, a bishop who happened to be a cousin of Emperor Constantine himself. The controversy spread like wildfire across the eastern Mediterranean. Churches split, congregations argued. The faith that was supposed to unite believers was ripping them apart. Enter Constantine the Great. In 324 AD, Constantine had just become sole ruler of the entire Roman Empire after defeating his last rival. He'd legalized Christianity with the Edict of Milan back in 313. He saw in this growing religion a potential force for unity across his sprawling, fractious empire, and now that religion was at war with itself. This wasn't Constantine's first attempt at resolving church divisions. He'd already dealt with the Donatist controversy in North Africa through the Council of Arles in 314. Constantine reportedly said that division in the church is worse than war. Whether his motivations were purely spiritual or deeply political, probably both, he decided to act. He sent invitations to all 1,800 bishops across the Roman Empire, summoning them to a great council. The location he chose was Nicaea, a city in Bithynia, modern-day Iznik, in northwestern Turkey. He picked it specifically because it was close to his imperial capital at Nicomedia, which meant he could attend personally. The council opened on May 20th, 325 AD, in the Great Hall of the Imperial Palace. Somewhere between 200 and 300 bishops made the journey, nearly all from the eastern half of the empire. The Western Church was barely represented. Only a handful of Latin bishops attended, including Hosius of Cordova from Spain, who may have presided over the deliberations, and 2 priests sent by Pope Sylvester I, who didn't make the trip himself. But what these men lacked in geographic diversity, they made up for in lived experience. Many of these bishops bore the physical scars of the persecutions that had only recently ended. According to a Syriac account, some had their eyes gouged out, some had their ears cut off, some had their teeth pulled from the roots, some had the nails of their fingers and toes torn away. When Constantine entered the hall, resplendent in jewel-encrusted brocades that Eusebius described as shining like beams of light, he reportedly walked among these scarred bishops and kissed the wounds on their bodies. He came without his customary train of soldiers, a gesture of deference to men who had suffered for a faith he himself had not yet formally joined. And then the real work began. The central question was this: what is Jesus Christ in relation to God the Father? The Arian camp, led by Eusebius of Nicaea and supported by bishops like Menophantus of Ephesus and Patrophilus of Scythopolis, argued that Christ was divine but subordinate, a creation of the Father. The anti-Arian camp, led by Alexander of Alexandria, Eustathius of Antioch, and Macarius of Jerusalem, insisted that the Son was fully and equally God. Among the anti-Arian ranks was a young man who would become one of the most important figures in Christian history. Athanasius of Alexandria was just 27 years old, present only as a deacon accompanying his bishop. But he emerged as a fierce voice against Arianism, and this council would be the prelude to a life of conflict and glory. The debates were intense, theological, and deeply personal. But when the dust settled, the council produced something remarkable: the Nicene Creed. Its most critical phrase struck directly at the heart of Arianism. It declared that Christ was true God of true God, begotten not made, of one substance with the Father. That word, one substance, in Greek homoousios, became the theological line in the sand. This was in direct opposition to the compromise position of homoiousios, similar substance, a single letter difference that carried enormous theological weight. The Son was not a creature. The Son was God. The result was overwhelming. All but 2 bishops subscribed to the creed as adopted. Only Arius himself, along with Theonas of Marmarike and Secundus of Ptolemy, refused to sign. Arius's teachings were declared heretical. His books were burned. He was exiled by the emperor to Illyria. But the council didn't stop there. It also established a uniform date for the celebration of Easter, and it issued a series of canons, early church laws that set precedents for how Christianity would organize itself for centuries to come. And here's something remarkable that happened in 2025. In this anniversary year of the Council of Nicaea, Pope Leo XIV and Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew traveled together to Iznik, Turkey, for a joint pilgrimage. In a remarkable coincidence, Easter 2025 fell on the same date, April 20th, for both Western and Eastern Christians, an alignment that happens rarely and carries special weight in an anniversary year dedicated to the council that first tried to unify the celebration. Now, I need to address some things the Council of Nicaea did not do, because popular culture has gotten this spectacularly wrong. The council did not create the Bible. It did not vote on which books belonged in Scripture. It did not decide whether Jesus was divine. That was already believed. The question was, in what way? It did not establish the Catholic Church, and it did not make Christianity the official religion of Rome. That wouldn't happen until the Edict of Thessalonica in 380 AD. Much of this confusion traces back to Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, which planted ideas in popular culture that simply have no historical basis. Oh, and that story about St. Nicholas? Yes, the St. Nicholas punching Arius in the face during the council debates? It makes for a fantastic meme, but there's no evidence for it in any text before the late 14th century, and even that version only mentions a certain Arian. The legend grew and mutated over the centuries. It's great fiction. It's not history. Here's what often gets lost in the telling. The Council of Nicaea didn't end the debate. Almost immediately, the Arian faction began regaining influence. Eusebius of Nicomedia used his connections to Constantine to rehabilitate Arian bishops. Athanasius, who became Bishop of Alexandria in 328, was deposed and exiled multiple times over the following decades. The theological war raged for most of the 4th century. It wouldn't be until the Council of Constantinople in 381 AD that the creed would be expanded and finalized into what we now call the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. The creed laid a foundation, but the building took generations to complete. And yet, that foundation held. In 2025, 1700 years after those bishops gathered in that palace hall, the anniversary is being commemorated around the world. When Christians stand in their churches today and recite the words, begotten, not made, of one being with the Father, they're speaking a statement forged in the heat of argument, exile, and empire 17 centuries ago. The Council of Nicaea didn't just change Christianity, it gave Christianity a language for what it believed, and that language endures. But here's the thing, the Council of Nicaea didn't end the debate, it ignited it. The man at the center of that fight, Athanasius, would spend the rest of his life being exiled and restored. Exiled and restored 5 times. And it all came down to something almost unbelievable. A single letter. One letter in one Greek word that split the entire Christian world and nearly unraveled everything Nicaea had built. That's the story coming up next, the Arian controversy, and why it almost destroyed Christianity from the inside out.